when they hire the senior person, they hire the person to have the senior person, but they don't trust them. They don't trust their opinion. They don't trust that they know what they're doing. They don't trust their knowledge. And then they try to control them. And then that ends up being a very bad thing, because that is the case of micromanagement gone wrong, because this person is now negative, problem to the team. It's not because they're negative. It's because you didn't trust them to let them go do the thing you hired them to go do.
Hi, David. Thank you so much for coming onto the show today.
Absolutely. Glad to be here.
First of all, I have to say you have such an interesting experience. So at the beginning, you worked for IBM and you decided to leave IBM because of war suit. So you went to Microsoft. And so I feel like that's just like a really interesting move in general. And so to start the show, tell us more about what's going on in your early life that kind of shaped you into who you are.
So for me, when I graduated university, I ended up taking a job at IBM Watson Research Center in Yorktown Heights, New York.
Mhm.
And, it's funny because even on my resume today, I almost never write it down because I was there for such a short period of time. But I was lucky enough to be put on a project that was basically, the first mobile phone, right? It was the PDA / mobile phone integration. It eventually became the Simon phone that IBM released. But again, I was there for such a short amount of time. But for me, I would go to work. The first day I went to work, I went to work in a white shirt and, some dress pants. And my boss comes into my office on that day and made it clear that I needed to wear a tie.
Mhm.
The second day I came into work, I kind of did the same thing. He made it pretty clear that I needed to wear a tie, and not just any tie, like a maroon reddish colored tie. And I just found that to be the weirdest thing. So by the end of the week, I was wearing t-shirts. Not me. It was a struggle enough for me to wear a collared shirt. So
Yeah.
yeah. But I would be every day, somebody would say something to me. And lucky for me, Microsoft came a calling, and I jumped ship from IBM to Microsoft.
Yeah.
And I think the funny story there is my dad was really concerned because he's like, IBM is a career. What's this Microsoft thing? This Microsoft thing doesn't make any sense. IBM, you make money. And then if you actually compared how much money I was making at IBM, and then you compared how much money Microsoft offered me for my job, it was, I think, 60% less. And my dad's like, why would you take a job for 60% less? It's like, because that's cool. Like, that's what I use every day. That's kind of what I kind of am into, right?
Mhm.
So I remember making the jump. My dad's like, yeah, you're making a bad decision. Uh, I tried to explain stock options to him, but he's like, yeah, you're still making a bad decision.
Yeah.
So yeah, again, early in my career, I think what shaped my career early on was just my fascination with personal technology. And then by
Mhm.
being able to be part of that was pretty exciting to me. Now, it was cool to be part of IBM Watson Research because I was like, this cool researchy place, but it wasn't practical. Like, nobody was walking around thinking of practical ideas to build into
Mhm.
products, right? It really was a research group to try to figure out, what three things might we do in the future, but never ship or never actually get done. So, so when I had the opportunity, I quickly jumped for it.
I think it's a really gutsy move. So I think you got your first computer when you were 8 years old, right?
Pretty
You and your
close, yeah.
brother both like the computer, and then you like to code, and then he likes to take things apart and stuff like that. Out of curiosity, on so what is your parent? Is your parents both like also fascinated about these things, or like are they more like a corporate people? Are they encouraging you guys to pursue the passion, or do you think it's more like you do it anyway?
I think for me, and my family, my brother and my sister,
Mhm.
our father definitely it thought that, being a doctor, being a lawyer, being a pharmacist, or something in that kind of work was like the pinnacle of success. But that was my dad, because my dad kind of, he was a pharmaceutical salesman. He did MRI machines. He kind of did a whole bunch of things kind of in the medical side of the world. So that was the world he knew. But at no point did he ever say, "Oh, you like these weird things over there. Like don't do that. Like, that's too weird." So like, he never was the kind of person who said, "Don't go do that." My mom was just very encouraging, right? I mean, she sacrificed for her kids so we can have stuff, because we did not grow up as a well-off family. I mean, we were middle class, so like it was no poverty or anything like that, but buying a TI 94A or an Atari 2600 was a big deal, right? It wasn't easy. And my parents definitely instilled this concept of work and a work ethic in you. Like, oh, you bought an Atari 2600, now you need a cartridge. How are you going to work for that? Like, mow the lawn, or fix the cabinet broke. Like, go rescrew the cabinet at 8 years old or 10 years old, right? So they were very open. They didn't kind of say no. They were cautious for sure, but it was a middle-class family. My mom was a housewife, is a housewife. Like, she spent her whole time, taking care of her kids, hyper-focused, which a crazy, insanely hard job. I can't understand how she put up with the three of us the whole time. My dad was, a corporate-y kind of person, but also he was he was into politics. He was into community. We had to play sports as kids. Like, you didn't, like, today's kids, like, hey, why don't you join the track team? No. Okay. Right. Like it was like, there was no ability for you to say no. So when they told you to go, play baseball or football or whatever, you basically said, okay. Right. But the good part there was, as I said, it instilled this work ethic into us that, you strive to not to fail. You put in the time, and maybe you'll get good and maybe you won't, but you're putting in the effort and the time. And that was very important. And you don't think of it later on in life, but it definitely is a foundation that is instilled in you. So whenever you're doing anything, like, that work ethic to get things done, to be on time, to create good stuff, is just there. So I give them credit for that. And I'm sure I gave them enough grief growing up that I appreciate their ability to still let go and give us the freedom to go tinker and play and allow us to do things like play with computers when my parents had no idea what it was, right? Or, why are you sitting in front of your Atari 2600, all day long? But we didn't. We had school and homework and sports and whatever you had to do. So you only had an hour to play. But when you had that hour, it was important, right? Like, you just hyper focused.
I know that you mentioned that you went to like Microsoft because Microsoft is cooler than IBM, even like IBM pays way more. So do you compare them as, like, let's say IBM was like the Google of its day, and then Microsoft is something like basically a unicorn startup, say Robinhood or something. Is that the case, or do you think my analogy is something not?
I would think of it today. Like, if you had the opportunity to go to, JP Morgan Chase and do something in the finance area, maybe they're going to pay you a ton of money, to be in the investment arm. Cool. However, if Stripe offered me a job to go fundamentally change the world and how payments are done, and people are minded like me, kind of a little bit of rebels who kind of want to do some things that may break the system, like, I would choose that, right? And it's not choosing the old thing versus the new thing. It's just a personality type, right? And I wouldn't say I'm the world's greatest entrepreneur or startup-y person, because that's not what I do. But I tend to focus on companies that are, trying to change the world in unique ways. So if I found a big company that was doing that, then sure, like, okay, like I wouldn't say no to it, but again, I look at what's happening and like the SoFis or Affirms or Stripes or Aidens or whatever, like those seems, or Robinhood seems so much more interesting than Bank of America, Merrill Lynch, Amex, right?
I feel what you're saying. I'm curious, like, do you think people that are like the most successful nowadays, in your generation are like the same people who were hot back in time?
I don't think generations are all that different in terms of there are differences. So there are definitely differences, but when it comes to what you're talking about, I think the entrepreneurial spirit has been there forever, and the way people attack the problems and the the ability to go create a company or do something new or be a rebel against the system, that's been there for a long time. And the younger you are, typically the more risks you want to take because you don't have family yet or whatever, you don't have responsibilities. And then as you get older, you kind of shift a little bit. So I think every generation kind of does the same thing. What I do think is there are a certain amount of people who, no matter what age they are generally just curious. And it's that curiosity. It doesn't matter, again, if they work at a small company, a startup, or a large company. It's that curiosity that drives them in new ways and makes them take risks no matter what age they are. Um, you know, do I really see a difference between Bill Gates, who's 60 something, and Zuck? Not really. Like, it was the same aspirations. If you look at their career paths, they're very similar. So I think I think the answer to your question is no, there aren't really differences. I believe that it doesn't matter of your generation. It doesn't matter if you're 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, as long as you are curious and you have that need to change the world, the system, the community, whatever it is, that will drive you, and that will cause you to do some pretty unique things. Opportunity is the hard part. Having the opportunity is the hardest part, right? Because you might not have money, VCs might not talk to you. So getting your foot in the door to potentially do some of your things is sometimes the greater challenge.
100%. I'm curious about, let's say, you've worked with a lot of really greatest leaders in our world today. Like, so you've worked with like Bill Gates, Steve Jobs, now Mark Benioff. Like, those are all just like really just world-class leaders. So curious on, like, when you met them, they were, more younger. They were more, I guess, like still working on to like this hot startup. So what were some characteristics do you think like a successful founder should have?
Okay. Good
Sorry, it's
question,
like a
for sure.
loaded question.
Yeah. What attributes of founders? I mean, they're all different and they're all unique and they all have, pluses and minuses. One of the things that I think about is at some point, each of them or everyone has had some vision,
Mhm.
and then just kind of knew they were probably going to fail 9 times out of 10, but still kept at it, still kept going. And they tried and they tried and they tried, and they all are somewhat charismatic, right? I mean, even the introverts are extroverted in a funny way, right? I mean, you can't go create Microsoft and get people to follow you and go from Albuquerque, New Mexico, then to Redmond, and then to, or Bellevue, and then to Redmond, and hiring and hiring and hiring without some kind of leadership ability, without some kind of charisma that people believe. And all the people I've met have a level of charisma that is infectious, that you want to go work with them to go on the mission that they're on. So I think that is kind of the core attribute that I see in founders that tend to be successful. They are actually natural born leaders. And they probably don't even know it, because don't forget, a lot of people are kind of mean and rude and crude and awful. But at the same time, no matter how mean they are to you, you're like, yeah, I still want to go build that. I still want to go do that, no matter, how much crap you take. So, and you're going to love them for various reasons, right? You love someone like Bill Gates because he's just insanely technically smart. No matter what you say, he can dive deep on the architecture. You love somebody like Bill Gates because he cares about the products, and he may not know as much about the engineering of it, but the products make a difference for him. Benioff really understands how to drive customers and put customers at the focus, and and create a relationship with customers. So sales and marketing, products, technology, three very different type of people, but all generally seem to have this ability to convince a whole bunch of people which what they're trying to do is cool and needed. And they typically succeed. For me, I think the thing that I try to tell new entrepreneurs or people starting their career, and I've said it before, so I am a broken record, which is the skill of listening and the skill of observing are so important, and you can't forget them. And those are things that, if you can do them right, can really help you drive whatever kind of company or business you're trying to go build. So I know I didn't necessarily answer your second question, so I'm going to make you
Yeah.
ask your second question in another way. But that's kind
I
of how I think of leadership, right? And these people,
Mhm.
while they might be yelling at you, they're also still listening, and they change their minds, right? So, you might say, we're going to paint this room blue. And then you prove to them why the room should be painted yellow. And all of these people who we look up to, the Elon Musks or the Zucks or the Google guys, whatever, right? One attribute they had very well is that they changed their mind. So when you can see that, yes, this is the right idea, that you have healthy debate, healthy argument, but you can change your mind. That's also, to me, a key attribute of a lot of the people who are great leaders.
Absolutely. I'm curious about like why, like, how are those people are like made of? Like, for example, like you mentioned, like they could be yelling at you and then you still like follow their lead. Is that because
Yeah.
they're just like really wicked smart? So you feel like whatever they said was actually true? Or like, do you think there was just like some characteristic also make you feel like,
Uh, that's a great question. I think that, once again, everyone's kind of a little bit different, but this is going to sound weird, and I'm not sure if anybody ever sees it this way, but the thing that I think that they do, either purposefully or not purposely, is they create a family where you care about each other. So you not necessarily you don't always care about the product, but you care about each other, right? And you're kind of in this room. Like, think about when you go to work, right? Pre-COVID, right? Especially in a startup, you're locked in a garage or a small office every day for 15 hours a day. And if you're not getting along, and if you're not trying to figure this out together, then you're just going to fail. So there's this concept that they build, which is a family, which they don't really, I think, purposefully do, but that's what they're doing. But what is it about a family? If you have brothers and sisters, well, you fight with them, right? Like, it's like a family isn't this perfect harmony going on every single day. Many of them are dysfunctional, but they work through the dysfunction. And so they build these groups of people that they trust, and they give you trust. So when you come into that company or into the aura of person A or B, you feel trusted. You feel like, no matter if you're 1 year into your career or 30 years in your career, that whatever opinion you have, they will listen to. It's just as important, no matter where you sit on the spectrum of experience. They make you feel, part of what you're trying to go do. So So that, to me, that's the weird, or the hidden psychological nature behind people, is the good ones make you feel part of something. The bad ones make it feel like a job.
It's that feeling is really hard to recreate, I guess, like as a someone wants to be a leader, because
Yeah.
it's like you have to tell them what to do, or like you have to like, kind of guide people, but also like, I don't know, like I feel like it is just like, I don't know how, like what are some actions that they took to like kind of create this kind of environment.
Grace, good question. I'm going to answer your question in a very strange way.
Okay, go.
Um,
I like your style, like I listen to your past interviews, you start asking the person questions, so I'm like, I was expecting this, so.
there you go. So, today we people are very sensitive, or they want a promotion every 12 months, and if they don't get a promotion every 12 months, they want to quit, or they become cancer within the organization. You have to find the poison in the organization. You have to get rid of them fast. Otherwise, it spreads very quickly. So you have to be, even if you're not a people person, you have to be watching what's going on and identify kind of the problem child. And you kind of have to make hard decisions very quickly. Today if you're in a large company, you get put on a PIP, you get like 6-week review, like all of these things happen. And as that's happening, the teams are getting more visceral because they're getting mad and angry, and that breaks that cohesion. When you're a startup and you're 6 people or 8 people or 10 people, before you have to scale to 500 or 1,000, you notice the people that are not doing the right work, and hopefully you get rid of them. And that, funny enough, that leadership of getting rid of the bad seed creates that family kind of mentality amongst the group. Like they now trust you as a leader, that you have their back. There's another thing that's happening where we tend to, we say, you need to come into this company and you need to be like us. You need to fit our culture. No, you don't. Like, hire smart people. And if you look at like the original Macintosh team, or you look at the original Windows team, it wasn't necessarily like people. It was a great bunch of people that had all kind of random crazy visions and ideas. But by bringing all that together, they coalesced to deliver something phenomenally good. So we need to continue to think through that. We talk about how micromanagement is bad. Sometimes things have to be micromanaged because they're not going well. Chris Peters at Microsoft, he had a very famous memo. I think Steve Sinofsky just published it on his website, where he talks about like shipping is a feature. Like you have to ship. And sometimes in order to do that, you have to be the benevolent dictator. You have to be the figure out what's not going right and fix that. Of course, you don't want to do that 100% of the time, and you want to give people the ability to great ideas bubble to the top and self-manage and things like that. But there are times when you gotta roll up your sleeves and dive deep. And great leaders of companies, they will find when these things happen, they'll roll up their sleeves and they'll dive into the problem. They might not be able to write the code for you, but they're going to dive in and attack that problem and be part of the team. So, a lot of the old adages that we talk that sometimes we talk about, like, oh, we have to get rid of this, we have to get rid of this. I don't necessarily agree. What I think about is, building a group of people and to go build great products is a ton of give and take. It's leadership, it's direction, it's strategy, it's vision, it's building it, it's getting it done, it's understanding when the wrong people are doing the wrong job, maybe moving them to do the right job. And don't be afraid, make decisions. So that's how I kind of, again, I said I'm going to answer your question in a weird way, which is, there isn't necessarily a recipe. And you need to be empathetic. You need to be sympathetic. You need to be a listener. You need to be an observer, but you need to be someone who is decisive, consistent, um, you know, earns the trust of all of those working for you, above you or below you. And those become very important attributes and values of the system. One of the things that Benioff believes very clearly at Salesforce, two things, I guess. I said one, but two. One is he loves to put customers at the center. But the second value, which is actually the first value, is trust. And that builds such a culture that you believe you can go into a meeting, say the dumbest thing, but like the team has your back, right? So these are those little nuggets, I think, that become really, really important.
Absolutely. I think okay, so I wrote down 3 points. I feel like
Okay.
this is really the opposite of like the leadership I like in my head. One thing
Yeah.
is you said get rid of the wrong people and like in all these like blogs when you're like trying to find jobs, if you read like Glassdoor or like Bland or something, it's like, oh, someone got fired, so I'm worried about am I getting fired? But like you said, I feel like getting rid of the wrong people does make sense to like build trust. So like people
Yeah.
don't have to work with shitty people on the show.
Yeah.
Shitty people.
Sure.
So I think it's really interesting. Essentially, just like putting smart people in the right place, kind of thing. So I feel like that's like also really important. And then you said about like if you need to micromanage, you need to micromanage. Like if it's like shipping a product, shipping is a feature, shipping is a feature. I also I think I saw that article somewhere. It's so like contrary than like the leadership principle of like what you can read in like a book, but it is kind of true.
Look, we've said things that become negative in context. Like we say micromanaging and every all that immediately negative context. But if you use analogies in your own life, you may not call it micromanaging, but you needed to manage something to get something done. You needed to ship a product. You had a series of tasks you wanted to do. You just happen to be managing yourself and kind of managing me, so it's a pretty simple scenario. But but that's okay, right? So if you extrapolate that to something larger, like you know, your publisher needs you to get a book done by a particular date, and they need you to get an outline, and you're not delivering that outline. Are they going to come to your house and help you write the outline? No, that's kind of over. That's the negativity of micromanagement. What they're going to do is they're going to, you know, set up a meeting where you're going to go over your outline with them. That's going to now force you to get your outline done, right? So we need to understand that we need to build products, deliver products, and we need to do them with quality that customers are going to love, etc. And sometimes, in order when you see parts of your team failing or falling behind, it's okay to kind of say, what the hell are you people doing? What's our bottleneck? What do we need? Like, what roadblocks do I need to remove for you so you can move faster or at least get moving? And there are a lot of people who are like, oh my gosh, so and so came in and did this. It's like, no, that's okay, right? Like, because what they're trying to do is not say that you're doing a bad job. What they're trying to figure out is how to get the team to be more functional, or to get whatever needs to be done. So yeah, so I say there, there are times when you got to roll up your sleeves, dive in, and solve the problem. One of the things I definitely preach wherever I go, right? I talk a lot about who's accountable for feature X or who's responsible, who's our decision makers. So accountability and responsibility is very important. And we'll never do a project where we don't know who's accountable for delivering, A, B, or C. And that puts people's butt on the line, right? You can't hide behind politics or architecture documents or, a series of things that you want to necessarily potentially hide behind. So we try to be clear on who's accountable. And I think that's a principle that from a management perspective, helps you and helps the team, understand how we're going to get from point A to point B. And it's a level of transparency that I like to have, so people know exactly who it is. And it's never hidden. It's never like, oh, I'm going to talk to person A and tell them to do this, and then I'm going to talk to person B because I don't trust A to go do the same thing. No. We say A is accountable and responsible. This is how we're going to make decisions and go forward. And you don't undercut your employees. And then I think a lot of times what happens in corporations, as you try to scale or grow and multiple people think they own the same thing, people are starting to, undercut each other to try to figure out how they can be better so they can get the better promotion or whatever. And you got to have to stop that. And you stop that primarily by being transparent. What's our stress? What are the top 10 things we're doing? And then who's accountable and responsible for each of those things?
I'm curious about, like, you mentioned a lot about like how other people are great managers. I'm curious, like, what do you think were your strengths that attract you to, or attract like these leaders to, work with you?
My particular strength, I think, they may argue it. So this is my own, I guess, ego and own internal view of myself. Which could be completely wrong.
I'm going to put it out there. So like, from your track record, you've worked for Microsoft, Yahoo, Disney, Nordstrom, Salesforce, like all of them are, I guess, like VP level and above, like roles, right?
Yeah.
What's like, I wouldn't say what's going on there, but like, like curious, like, this is like a really successful track record for anyone's career, right? So, like, what do you think that make you successful?
Yeah, look, I have the ability to understand technology from a user's perspective. I have this ability to say what's going to happen in 2 or 3 years from now. And typically, I'm more right than wrong. These things come true. I typically come in with a vision and a strategy that's somewhat outside of what they're thinking. And then they actually get to see that I can be at the 100,000 foot view and the 1 foot view. I care about how things work and take care about how pixels look. And I bring a lot of knowledge. So, I love to read. I'm constantly reading and researching. I read so much part of every single day that I try to learn even things that I don't know. So I think people like that. I think if I ever interview somewhere, it clearly is this, ability to articulate a future or kind of some vision for one of their problems. They'll give me a problem that they have, and I'll say, oh, have you did this, and this? And then we'll talk about it a little bit more. And then they realize as we're talking about it, I'm understanding it as well as they are. It's maybe sometimes better than they do. So I have a very fast ability to kind of understand complex issues and problems and then create simple solutions, simple ideas for those problems that I think customers are going to want or would resonate with. So I think that's kind of my secret sauce. And again, I love to tinker. So I can have great relationships with engineers who want to talk about, whatever piece of code they're writing today, all the way up to, talking about M&A activity that we should go acquire or do, to what's the product we're building, and not just this product, but the next one and the one after that. And I think that way, like, so even when I'm building a product, I think about what is not necessarily the end game for this thing we're doing now, but kind of what's the further end game that we really want to kind of achieve, and then put some kind of timeline to it.
For sure. I think that's you mentioned about like, you're worried about what's the next step, but also like the whole picture. I think that's like a really rare skills to have. And then like, I think sometimes you just got stuck into the tactics every day to, to even like look at the big picture, because sometimes we kind of know like what we should supposed to be doing in the long run, or like in the big picture, we should focus on something, but because of it's hard, so we kind of just focus on what's in front of us. But that if you just keep doing what's like next, I don't know, like I feel like you seems like managing it really well. I'm curious about like, how do you do both at the same time?
I don't know. It's a really good question. I think everyone is looking at you at different points of the day for different points of information, right? So there is your day job where you have to be tactical and operational. And some people are great at tactics and operations, and some people aren't. And some people are great at strategy and vision, and some people aren't. But at every role you have to actually ship software. You actually have to build products. You have to actually get things done. So you have to get down to the tactical area, and you have to know when it's appropriate to be there versus the other part. My day, if you look at a typical day, it's always split between, me doing my work that I need to do for my boss or for whatever. Then there's managing a bunch of people that are very operational, like actually writing the code and doing the things. And then there's the part of the day, which is, what are we doing? Why are we doing it? How are we going to get there? So I constantly do those three, pieces every single day. But I'll answer your question a little bit oddly, which I'll say, when you have people who work for you, and you see them so caught up in stressing over, the story points that they have to get through. Yes, they need to get through that, but you got to grow your people to a point where you have to expand them and give them tasks and projects that are a little bit further than the current thing they're doing. So you're building that skill within them to not just be tactical, but to also think about the longer term architecture, to also think about things that come next. And I was lucky to have managers in my career that allowed me to do that. And because they allowed me to not just, do my day job, but to, be part of the meetings, thinking about where are we going or how are we doing it, or asking me what's my opinion on something. That is the thing that brought the muscle memory into me, that allows me to be kind of multifaceted. So when I have teams of people, large or small, doesn't matter, one of the things I instill is that we need to make sure our people aren't stuck. And they need to be, I'll give you a great example. We have a particular person in the company, and they are a machine learning person, right? Like they spend their days in Python. They love data analytics. They love they want to write R code. And then you say, stop for a sec. Where are we going from a product perspective with the machine learning stuff you're going to do? So let's talk about next generation recommendation engines, where they aren't really, they're kind of smart, knowledgeable engines. Let's not even call them recommendation engines. And by simply asking that person that question, it broke him out of his day-to-day to think about where can we go. And therefore the pieces he was creating today will fit into that strategy that he was a part of. And even if it was 100% my strategy, he helped mold it, change it, pull some levers to get it to also be his strategy. So, that is, to me, one of the things you have to do. If you come in and you say, it has to do this, then everyone believes, oh, it's a mundane job, right? I just punch some keys to get something done because I have to do exactly that. That's why I think the way you build people and the way you manage people and you lead people is you get them to believe that, again, this gets back to this kind of family concept. You get them to believe that, they were part of the solution, and everybody wants to put their unique fingerprint on everything, no matter what you do. And so let people be able to put their unique fingerprint on them. Don't stifle that creativity.
I think that's such a great way to engage the employees. I'm curious about, when it comes to managing your time, do you strategically kind of spend half of your day solving a tactical problem and then half of your day to read stuff to basically broaden your horizon about making the big picture decisions?
I don't think of it as a day process.
Mm-hmm.
I think of it as, or what do I do in a particular day with this hour, that hour? So I don't structure myself that way. I kind of structure myself saying, pick Monday morning or Friday mornings, you pick your time, but like on Monday mornings, that's when the whole team gets together where we have our conversation about what did we do last week and what are we doing this week. So it's very tactical and operational, right? So everyone kind of knows, at least from my point of view, down where we're going and what we should be doing. And everyone of quote importance or who has skin in the game is in that meeting, and there's no secret. So we try to figure out what the bottlenecks are in that meeting and then potentially try to remove them in that meeting so they can move forward during their week and not be totally blocked. So Monday is typically our very operational day, 8 a.m. to around 1 p.m. That's kind of how the day works. And then the rest of the week is random, right? You're probably doing, 30% of your week is probably thinking about product reviews or technology reviews, just kind of reviewing what we're doing. There's another part of the week that, you somebody from some other team, you have to go build that relationship. You have to explain to them what you're doing, why you're doing it. So there's cross company, deliverables and articulation. There's times where you have to go build a 6-pager in the Amazon case or a PowerPoint in the Salesforce case to upper management that's not you. So there's kind of a lot of this random processy stuff that exists that you have to go do. But I take time out of every week to tinker, to read, to play. And playing for me, could be, I don't understand how Salesforce Commerce Cloud works. How does it work? Let me go install one. And not don't have my admin do it or some architect do it or something like that. No, I'm going to do it on my own, right? I'm going to pretend I'm a customer. I'm going to, figure out how to install it, how to customize it, how to do something, right? So and that could be our own products. It could be third-party products. It could be looking at something. It can be investigating something. For example, a lot of people think you're going to be having business meetings with, VR glasses on your head. You're not. But how can I say you're not if I've never tried it before, or if I've never gone and looked at something, right? So let's go buy an Oculus and go, figure out, is this something that people want to go do every day and observe people, talk to people. So it's unfortunately I don't have that great inspirational, this is how I do it. I'm an inquisitive person. I'm a learning person. So I spend a lot of my week just kind of talking to people and learning and understanding, and then saying, adjusting products, having debates and conversations. At the same time, understanding we have to go deliver the things that we're committing on and drive the team to go deliver on those commitments.
Right. Curious about speaking of working at Salesforce, right? What's your day-to-day like as a SVP of Philanthropy?
There are all different kinds of meetings that you could have. Some are informational meetings, and you need to understand that they're informational meetings where someone wants to show you a product or a feature, right? And then give feedback on that product or feature. Some of them are decision meetings where you need to go make a decision. But like I said, there is time to tinker and to play. So I always have that in my week. But yeah, there's other executives all over the place. You're constantly meeting with them. You're meeting with your people. I do a lot of one-on-ones. So again, in a pre-COVID world, I'm the person who likes to go for walks. So we would, leave the Salesforce building and we'd go walk downtown San Francisco. We'd go walk for, go 6 blocks north. You just make a big loop, but you spend an hour walking. Getting to actually talk to people, architecture decisions. So sometimes, even though we might have a chief architect of the team, why are we doing it? What are we doing this? This doesn't make sense to me. So actually having some of those debates, why do we use GraphQL versus, REST APIs? Which you might say, why does an SVP care? But you should care. You should have these conversations. But that, again, random. It's meetings, it's people, it's product reviews, it's product strategy, it's not the let's go do a stand up of like, the entire dev organization to say what they're doing today. We kind of do it at a higher level where the feature managers or the feature teams all come and kind of say where they are, what they're doing, and then have input. A lot of it is looking at stuff and saying, have you thought about this? Have you thought about this? Have you talked to this person? Connecting dots. Do a lot of dot connecting, believe it or not.
What is like the general picture of the philanthropy department? Like from my understanding, it's like Salesforceorg is different from Salesforce.com. I don't know. I have no clue. I'm an outsider, right? I can only read from the news. I know like Salesforce will donate 1% of the revenue to the world. What's a general vision of like what you guys doing at the philanthropy org?
So when I got there, Salesforce.org was a separate entity. And then Salesforce.com acquired Salesforce.org and brought it back in-house. So now it's the same company. But the people in the philanthropy organization basically do, let's say, 4 things. The first thing is build software specific to the education vertical.
Mm-hmm.
So, deliver things that Stanford's going to need for alumni management and things like that. So that's a layer on top of Salesforce, right? So by doing that, then the software that gets sold to educational institutions are typically sold at a cheaper rate than you can normally go buy Salesforce at. Then we do the same thing for nonprofits, where you are the Boys and Girls Club, you have a bunch of donors, a bunch of people want to volunteer time, et cetera, et cetera. You need to manage all of this. You need to manage the money coming in. So there's a grants management, blah, blah, blah. There's a whole bunch of kind of software, again, sits on top of Salesforce. The third pillar, which is the Philanthropy Cloud, but I would call it just basically workplace giving. So you're Google and you want your employees to donate money to causes, and you may match their gifts by 1x or 2x or something like that. But their software, when you're on your intranet, if you want to think of it that way conceptually, right? You go to give.google.com, that really goes to Philanthropy Cloud, and you can see all the approved charities that Google likes that you can then go donate to or volunteer your time. So education, nonprofits, workplace giving. The fourth piece, which is not really in the philanthropy team anymore, it's kind of separated out, which is the donating money to philanthropic organizations, be it education or whatever, where you're actually donating and giving money away, part of the 1% pledge or whatever. Those are kind of the 4 key pillars that the team focuses on. So think of it as industry verticals on top of Salesforce. It's kind of the most simplistic way to think of it. And you can see in the future, right, be it Salesforce or any of the other competitors, industries are going to be very, very important, right? As you start thinking about the verticals around, like the retail vertical or the finance vertical or the health vertical. So the thing that the Salesforce team and Parker Harris and Benioff did in the beginning, and now with Brett Taylor there, the things that they did was, what was key is they really built Salesforce not as an app, but as a platform. And by being a platform, it allows these industries to be created. And through the app exchange that it has, for industries were created just like the software industry, right? Like there's a whole bunch of ISVs that sit on top of Salesforce that build all these kind of cool things. And then you start looking at the world and you're saying, okay, wait a minute. This vertical is super important. This vertical is super important. So then you start consolidating, and then Salesforce itself or competitors then start building verticals. So that's kind of the next, I think, iteration of these kind of companies. They're going to start giving their platform to a lot of people to go build on, and then building solutions on top of their platform, just like Microsoft did on Windows and our Windows strategy, or what Apple does, or any kind of the platform companies.
Yeah, wow, like that's really impressive. Actually, like I mean, when like, as a reader, when you read someone donate some money into on the news, it's like, okay, so it's just like money from one bank account to another bank account. But when you describe it, there's like four essentially four vehicles or like four like different departments or four different products that you guys are creating. I feel like that's a lot goes into it. Like that is actually, um a whole like four different product team on are working on different things. I feel like that just sounds like way much more sophisticated than
Yeah.
outsider's perspective.
And look, if you just take something as simple as nonprofits, you realize how unsimple it is, right? Because if you're a person who's granting money to some other person, how do you submit a grant? How do you submit a grant request? Where's that grant request due? What's the review process for that grant? Then once that grant gets approved, money has to get distributed. Where does the money get distributed? Do you trust that person? Do you have any checks and balances in place such that that person isn't stealing the money and pretending to be a charity? Like,
Right.
oh, we're trying to go solve water distribution in Africa, and it's like, and someone wrote a great grant and proposal, and they have all the right legal documents, but at the end of the day, they're stealing the money. How do you track all that? How do you trace that? So even when you think about some of the most simplistic cases, you have to ask yourself, you know, again, let's just take the day in the life of a grant. What does it look like? Okay, and then you start asking your all these questions, and then all of a sudden, the software gets pretty complicated pretty quickly.
Absolutely. Wow. Like that is I feel like everyone should be hearing this just because like I'm like this is like news to me, like I've never even like thought about it that like hard, like it
Yeah.
is yeah, it is like actually a lot of work to build up a really complex system to track these because it's like a lot of money involved. So like I definitely feel like it's a
Yeah.
very important thing to have some sort of like track. I know that you work for, Disney, like Nordstrom, those are more like consumer focused company, and then Microsoft, Yahoo, and Salesforce are more like to B businesses. What's the difference between like a 2C company and 2B company? And from my understanding, although you are in like as a CTO or like engineering
Yeah.
department, but I feel like you're more like a product person. Um,
Mhm.
Talk about like, what do you see as like the future of the trend in like these two building products successfully in the 2C space and the 2B space?
A lot of people want to say, most people want to say that they're different. They're not, because, well, think about it, right? Like, if you're a company and your workday, right, and you're producing um, HR kind of capability,
Mhm.
and you're selling that to another enterprise. But at the end of the day, the person who has to use Workday is the employee. They're a customer. It's no different than getting music on your iPhone in Apple Music, right? It's still software. It has to work. It has to look pretty. It has to be thought through. It can't be complex. Now, enterprise software in the past was ugly and bare bones, and they didn't have designers, and nobody thought about interaction models. But if you look at enterprise software today, go use Stripe. Go be the developer who does integrating with Stripe into your thing, and then go look at the reports that it builds. Stripe is amazing. Like, it's so simple and so easy to use.
Are you an
Um,
investor in Stripe? I'm just
no, I wish I was. I wish Stripe would hire me, because I'd go right work for Stripe in a second. I think they're just amazing. Um, from their developer portal to the way that they show, the transactions, they just do a phenomenal job. And they do it because they have a consumer mindset. Even if the customer never sees their service, they have a consumer mindset. So the companies that are going to do well, the companies that are going to win, are the ones that have consumer mindsets. Greenhouse, right? Like, go do a greenhouse application for a job versus a workday application. When you do the greenhouse one, you're like, wow, this was great. As the person trying, like, and like, tried to go into company X. And then that looks good on company X because I didn't have to go through 30 different screens to go submit my resume. I'm on one, and look how like you parsed the Word doc or the Google doc or the PDF just perfectly, and it just worked, right? Like, so you have to have that mentality. And if you don't, you're gonna die. Like, I mean, some systems are awful, and you have to use them because there is no other one. And to me, that's opportunity. Like if you use Concur for doing expense reporting, it's like the world's worst B2B app. Like it's confusing, it's complicated, it's ugly. Like go disrupt that business. Like because once again, you need that customer mindset. So I don't think of them being different. I do think of them as being the same. And I try to hire people who think of them the same. I think one of the interesting things is that when you are dealing directly with your customer and not indirectly, because so sometimes, you know, we like to think that the B2B stuff is an indirect relationship with a customer because I'm sitting here applying to a job at Disney through Workday. So Workday isn't really there, you know, talking to me, but they are. Um, but for me, I think when you have these kind of indirect relationships, it's important for the B2B side to really think of the end user, the end customer who's using their stuff, which again is an employee, doesn't matter if you're at home or not. If you're a company like Disney and you're doing things where, you know, the magic band gets you into the park, or you're going into a Disney store, you're watching a film, kind of quote the direct engagement, you are constantly, you're just constantly trying to simplify things like that's even though you should be doing that in the B2B case, but the consumer case has kind of a higher urgency to it. You know, I give the example, you know, if Tesla was making, or if a car company, so Tesla's the bad example, but so if you go into like a Ford car and you look at the consumer user interface for the car, and then you go into a Ford truck and look at the interface, they're different. Why are they different? Still drivers. It's still, you know, I still want to listen to music. I still want to put on the windshield wipers. I still want to do all the things that I want to be able to do, maybe do self-driving, etc. Whereas Tesla thinks of those two people as the same person. Yes, you're driving, right? So when you are engaged directly with that consumer, you should take a look at what they do and be a little bit more attentive to detail, I think. But again, I think of them the same. I don't think of them as different. So it doesn't matter if you know, even when you're building interfaces and you're a pure developer company and you're pure API based backend, like your end user is developers. And to me, they're just customers. And if you give them something super complicated and the documentation doesn't make sense, they're probably not going to use you, or they're going to have a really hard time using you. And if you give them something simple, something easy, something intelligible, and it's a delight to do, and you support all the languages that they're going to want to support, it's easy. Like, right? You have that aha moment. So yeah, long-winded answer, but I think of them as the same. So I don't really think of them as differently. I think you have to go build software and products for customers, and you always think about who is using the thing that you're delivering, be it if it's machine to machine or machine to person or whatever. I think you consciously have to understand who your customer is and build things that's going to make their lives easier and better.
For sure. I know that like, you know, when you were working for Nordstrom, so
Yeah.
at that point, you talk about like Amazon was essentially like, you know, selling everything that's like cheaper, and then like Nordstrom's people would want to sell on Nordstrom. They're not Amazon because they're like more high-end brands. So when you came into a workplace that's you know, like waiting to be digital, that like digitized, you know, what was your game plan like when you first landed on the team to like kind of transform them into a digital place?
Me not being a retailer, um, to me, the idea was, what would Nordstrom be if it started online first? What would it look like? How different would it be? Or would it be the same? And by using that as a starting point, you think about, okay, sure, it probably would have had better distribution centers, better supply chain, better website, better mobile engagement, whatever. So you could start thinking through all of that. But the key there was, you're not starting from scratch, and you have all of these stores that exist, and people love going to the stores. Why do they love going to the stores? So the question is, how do you start to marry digital and physical presence in new and unique ways to delight customers? So my mindset there was, how do I leverage the store in new ways to give customers unique experiences? And it's understanding the customer. For example, I have no specific data. Like I didn't go, spend a couple $1 million hiring researchers to go study this. But if you go into the shoe department at Nordstrom and you watch single men coming into the women's shoe department, and you watch them go from the low end shoe to the high end shoe. When they're in the high end shoe department and they first pick up that shoe and turn it over, and they see a price of Dior shoes is, $995 for a little loafer. They're like instantly appalled, right? Like, oh my God. So because they had that experience, they're embarrassed to pick up every other shoe. How do you solve that problem? How do you solve discovery of merchandise on your own terms that makes it comfortable for you and engaging for you? So maybe you use AR, maybe you point your phone at the shoe, and when you point your phone at the shoe, it recognizes the shoe and it puts the price on the screen and tells you what sizes are available. If you happen to buy a shoe for your wife or your daughter before, it might actually highlight in bold their sizes are available. So you start, so my mindset was, make the store come alive, make it be better than it was before. And then how do you take that and all the knowledge you have in the cloud and all the knowledge you had in selling, and then bring that back into the store? That was kind of job one. Job two was, okay, now that you have all this information, how do you think about the website and the selling experience such that it can be simple and easy for people? So again, recommendation engines, machine learning, and we all go through the same things, which is, bring your camera and like take 7 pictures of yourself, and maybe you can auto size something for you. No one's ever going to do that. Like even Amazon got rid of their little Echo Show camera, whatever they called it, that was in your closet. But you think about, how do you bring, again, technology into your home or into your life that then can augment the digital experiences? So me going there was about, how do you turn Nordstrom into a product company? How do you think about products? The store is a product, just like an iPhone is a product. How do you leverage what you already have? How do you leverage all of the data that you've been collecting on customers for 100 years? And then, right, I mean, they're a 100-plus-year-old business. Mm-hmm. And then how do you start marrying physical and digital, and then create a strategy and a vision around that? And we created 6 or 7 projects, and we went on our way, kind of rethinking it. We hired some really good people in machine learning. We brought in design thinking. We had, part of the executive team go to the Stanford Design School to kind of go learn design thinking in a different way. So re-educating, reopening people's eyes, getting old school retailers with new school kind of retailers, mixing the cultures together, watching them butt heads and like, hey, you don't understand, but you don't understand, right? So a great thing, we hired this person from, I think from Wharton, and she buys everything like on like the runway model, right? And nobody at Nordstrom's like, what? This is crazy. Why would you ever want to wear used clothes? Because it's about selling new clothes. And like, she would come in with a new handbag like every 3 days. Like, look, right? And her clothing bill was cheaper than, 80% of the people working in the office, because she chose to do it differently. And
So she was renting? Is that what you're saying?
yeah. So the struggle, I mean, she buys her strategic stuff and then she rents, some shoes or bags or whatever it is you do. I wasn't saying that's the right way to go or that's the right strategy, but you got to look at that person and say, wait a minute, this person is acting fundamentally different than our customers. Do more people think this way or not think this way? How do they bring a unique perspective in picking out and buying things?
Mm-hmm.
And the key there is when she wants to actually make the purchase, what does she choose to purchase versus rent? So that purchase decision and that mindset, like that's the gold little nugget. That's the needle in the haystack. So once you start to understand that, okay, well, we might not go down the rental business because it's from a business perspective, it doesn't make sense on what we do for a living and how this company works. But that mindset, wow, is that important? And then you try to figure out how do you start adding those concepts and ideas into merchandising, into your mobile app or whatever. And then you watch and you measure and you watch how sales go up because of these kind of crazy ideas. But again, the key there was, how do you take people who have different thinking than you
Mm-hmm.
and let them thrive? And that to me is always magic. So don't ask me how I do it, but it's always this kind of magic where you find the people who are entrenched in the way that they do things, and you bring people who are contrarians around, and not because they're contrarians, it's just because they grew up in a different way of doing it, right? Like, if you brought a bunch of 17-year-olds into Disney today, and again, let's say this a couple of years ago, and they tell you how they watch YouTube first, and they name 10 people you've never heard of, and they get 40 million views a day. Like, everyone at Disney would be like, what? Like, no, this is garbage content. Like, why would anybody want this awful stuff? And it might be awful, but you need to understand that really what they're telling you is that they are streaming first. They are mobile first.
Mm-hmm.
So you had to go build a product like Disney Plus to bring it to them, because that's where they're going to consume their content. They're not going to go consume it knowing what ABC is or Disney Channel is. They're going to know what an app is. And then within that app, they're going to go search for stuff, right? That's what the YouTube generation taught you, is like, streaming is important, search for stuff, have good content, be able to find what you want when you want it, watch it whenever you want it and how you want it. Mostly probably on an iPhone or an Android device, and that drives the purists of movies crazy, but it's what they do, right? But that's bringing in the contrarian who would come in and say, yeah, I don't own a cable TV subscription, right? Whereas the mindset, 10 years ago in Disney was, yeah, everybody owns cable. Yep, they own cable, right? Why would that change? Even though they saw streaming in this Netflix thing or whatever. Yeah, Netflix is just another channel. We can throw some content there. No. The world has fundamentally changed.
I think you're completely right. Why I asked you about what innovation that you are like, how you think about like how Nordstrom could, adapt the new technology or business model. I think because in the past 2 years, I worked and lived in China. So I was originally from China, came as an international student when I was 17, right? So like in the last 2 years, I went back to working and investing in China. So my observation is like China, the new malls, like they just build internet first. So like they don't ask you to shop in their store because they know that like you're gonna just take a picture and then put it on Taobao and then see which one is like more cheaper, right? So they just designed it as like they only have one piece of that cloth in that one store. So they design like experience first, and then you see a lot of these like indoor skiing, or like there's a lot of like really activity that you could be doing. And then all these malls are primarily food driven because they know that you only gonna look at the clothes and then like go buy it on the internet. So I think like it's really interesting to see. I think in China, like they just built these malls from scratch. Then in the US, like I don't imagine Nordstrom is gonna like just disjoy like all
Right.
their counters about the Dior shoes, right? Like, so it's like really interesting to observe how different culture and different people like think about it. I'm curious about like, I think like you mentioned a really good point, right? Like hiring, don't because of like their age or like their experiences,
Yeah.
like you hire like everyone to create like some sort of different perspective within the team, right? But I think like it's really hard to manage when, let's say, like the younger people may be really good at like, you know, censoring what's a new trend. And then I think like it's harder to convince someone who's more senior who, you know, especially I feel like when my friends that are founders, they hire like someone who is way more senior than them, like it's hard for them to like manage people. I heard people just like really, you know, they don't really know how to like, you know, make sure that everybody are in line with the goal. So like what's your perspective on like, you know, managing your own team that are, you know, maybe some people are like experts in a particular category, and how do you make sure like everybody wants to work with each other?
That gets back to trust, right? So clearly the person who, if you're the young startup with a bunch of young people and then the young founders, when they hire the senior person, they hire the person to have the senior person, but they don't trust them. They don't trust their opinion. They don't trust that they know what they're doing. They don't trust their knowledge. And then they try to control them. And then that ends up being a very bad thing, because what that is the case of micromanagement gone wrong, because this person is now negative, problem to the team. It's not because they're negative. It's because you didn't trust them to let them go do the thing you hired them to go do. So if you're going to go hire, again, this gets to the accountability and responsibility part we talked about. Like if you're going to go hire a chief product officer and they've worked at Google before and they've been at Google for 15 years, you are turning over the reins of your of you used to being the chief product officer as a founder to that person. And now it's your job to trust that person. And that's the mistake everybody makes, is that they don't want to let go. Your best leaders and managers understand when it's time to let go and trust others to take the reins and make decisions. So that's always been the problem. Again, when I hire people, we talk about who's accountable and responsible, but we have conversations around what's the product, who's going to do what, and we allow for the free flow of ideas. And if I say, so-and-so, she's my new chief product officer, I'm hiring her for that job. I may have opinion and we may go argue about it, but that person who I just hired, she's the decider, not me, right? So we're just clear. We hire people. I mean, like, people management's always hard because there's personalities, there's people who like each other, dislike each other. There's people who are great. There's people who come in saying, I've done this for 30 years. It has to be this way. And they won't bend their ideas and won't listen. And to me, that's then mentoring them like, no, you need to listen to other people, right? Like, it's not that they're immediately wrong. So otherwise, if you don't listen to other people, we would have stagnated, at computers, 20 years ago. So that listening part's important. So it becomes a mentor challenge, but you spend the time to mentor people and put people in the room to have the hard conversations, and you watch them kind of go and free flow of ideas. And more often than not, I've been pretty lucky that the mixture of age and talent has been good. But it doesn't mean I haven't let people go or had a shift managers or individual contributors from this team to a different team because they just weren't doing the right thing. So you have to watch, you have to understand it. But that's just part of building a company and being a manager. You trust your people, make them accountable, make them responsible, and you go. So, but part of your job is that. Like, so, and if you don't want to do this, so one of the interesting things about some of my founder friends, like, they don't want to manage people. Like, they don't want to spend the time managing, because what they've done when they were a small startup of 6 people, they all were writing the code together or, designing the UI together. And then when there are 20 people, they still kind of want to do it. But now someone becomes the CEO or is the CEO, and their job kind of changes, but they still don't want to let go, right? Like, you got to know when, to let go.
What's like, how do you set up a KPI for yourself? Like we chat about like the Nordstrom situation.
Yeah,
You've worked at like smaller company too, right? Like Playdom,
yeah,
acquired by
Playdom.
Disney. Curious, like, throughout your career, like whenever you got into a new job, like how do you quickly figure out like what you are hired to do, and then how do you figure out like what should be the realistic but also kind of like a stretched KPI for yourself and your team?
Again, big companies versus small companies are a little bit different. Big companies, your first 30, 60 days, it's about talking to people to understand
Hmm.
who is responsible for the various pieces, and getting a quick understanding from your boss. Why are you even here? Like, why did they hire you? Right? Like, um, and once you understand that, you can kind of start looking at, okay, what are we trying to judge? The funny part is most companies you go to actually have no metrics for individual contributors, or have no metrics. They actually have them for kind of individual contributors at a project level, but they don't really have metrics. So you try to understand what's the realistic part. What is the thing you're trying? What should you be measured on? Right. So depending on role, is it sales? Is it delivery dates? Is it customer satisfaction? So you pick some external metrics, you pick some internal metrics that you think kind of qualify. And it's kind of a work in progress, right? Like, I mean, I think you sometimes change your metrics. But again, for me, I've been hired to do job A or B or C or D, and understanding what that is and putting a strategy together, and then putting away an operational plan, and then we start measuring that operational plan everywhere within the organization. Doesn't So if I'm the highest level person or the lowest level person, for example, the platform team in the cloud, how fast are your APIs, what's your response time, what's the uptime, what's our security threat model look like, and you can start building a whole bunch of KPIs for like those kind of details, and then those influence a higher set, which influence a higher set. So I don't think I have a great answer for you, but I think, for me, I tried to understand why I'm there, like why they hired me, and then build a plan to go deliver on the goals that me and my manager or board or whomever set, and then be very clear about what they are, whatever they could be. For example, if you're going to a startup and your job is VP of engineering and your whole job is to scale the engineering organization, so you're starting to ask yourself, how fast are you hiring? What
Hmm.
you know how many teams do you have? How efficient are your teams? How It's kind of those kind of some of the fuzzy questions, right? Like, how are the teams getting along? And you try to build some kind of metric to be able to describe how you're going to scale an engineering organization or a product organization, because that's why you're there, right? Like, your job hired at that mid-stage startup was to scale engineering. What does it mean to scale engineering? Ask yourself the simple question. Then you start to write down, um, uh, what you think you need to monitor.
I mean, what did you learn from each experience?
Oh, I don't know. I think, look, every experience builds on the wealth of knowledge that you already have. So there's always, like, if you're not learning, then sometimes you ask yourself, why did you take the job? So a lot of difficult things happen. You see how you did it. You retrospect. I like to retrospect on myself. Like, how did I do? How did I, like, what went well? What could have gone better? If something went bad, how could it have gone worse? If something went well, how could it have even gone better than that? Um, so you try to. I just think you're constantly learning. I think if you stop learning, then that's a problem. So um, I think every job or position, there's always something you don't know. You learn it, you figure it out, and you continue to grow people, yourself. I don't know. I don't know really how to answer that, but I've never been in a place where I haven't learned something. right? I haven't taken away or haven't grown. So I try to, even when you're doing the same thing over and over and over again, I think your job is to figure out how to improve your team, how to improve your people, how to improve yourself, how to improve your product, how to improve your code. So, yeah, I just look at, am I better today than I was tomorrow? Sometimes the answer is no. It's like, okay, how do we get better?
What's you mentioned about the IBM culture, it's suit culture, right? Like, and then like Disney is also like, I think like at one point you want to move a chair or like move a table, and then they said like don't move it. And then
Yeah.
but like at Microsoft you would have just like, moved yourself or something like that. So like compared to these different company cultures, like what do you see that what like basically what works for like people nowadays? Like what do you see as like blocking from the company's success?
Uh, I'm not sure you can answer that because each company has a culture that is unique to them that you try to learn and be part of. For example, if you go to Amazon and you're not part of that 6-pager culture, you're just not going to thrive. And if you go in there thinking you're going to change the 6-pager culture, you're not, and they're going to eject you as fast as they possibly can. So I don't look at it as, my job is to come in and necessarily change the cultures of these companies. I look at it as a culture is there. How do we use that culture to leverage what I think needs to go get done? Some things you care about. I say it this way: you get to pick one or two things every year that you're gonna die on your sword for. Everything else doesn't matter. So don't die for everything. Um, am I
Die
going to
for everything.
change? Am I going to change the union style culture that Disney had? No. However, when we're building a new building, and if we think open offices are the thing, we can actually build open offices. If we think, creating little small pilot teams of like, 8 people to go build products is the right thing to do, then we can start doing that. So you pick and choose and you try to figure out again what culture you're in, what culture you've inherited, and then how do you use that to your advantage or to the company's advantage or to the product's advantage. So there's not a hard set rule. Again, I think I look to hire smart people who are inquisitive, who are listeners, who kind of want to push buttons. And as I hire these people, the culture itself tends to change and adapt. And and the way we do that is we ship products on time with high quality that customers want to use. There's nothing better than delivering something to prove to people that you can do it and that what you're trying to do is successful. And if you do that over and over again, uh, you tend to build within a company a group of people who will sit up and notice on, why, how did you do that, or how can we learn from you? And you're constantly teaching other teams and groups. So there's no one answer. I think you go into a company, you figure out what you got, hire smart people, build products, deliver, ship, pretty simple stuff, which is really hard to
For
do.
sure. Last real question is like,
Mhm.
uh, what's your information diet look like? I know that you know how to code, but like coding from a couple years ago to like maybe 20 years ago until now, like every day it changed, right? Like you have to learn about the new technology. You
Sure.
mentioned about you like to read, and then like the
Yeah.
technology landscape just like changed so much. Like, how do you educate yourself? Do you set up a routine, or like how do you do it?
I have pet projects that I constantly are doing. So, um, what's a good example? I just wrote a little Unity person who's running. So I learned Blender. I learned kind of what's the Unity rendering model, and how do I connect that to an AWS cloud? And then AWS for Lambda functions has multiple different things. So I wrote a couple functions in JavaScript, a couple functions in Python, and one in Go. I don't know. I'm always again, as I said, I'm inquisitive and I'm a tinkerer. And because I like to tinker and play and do things, I stay pretty much up to date on things. And then I get deep. Like I kind of want to know why this thing works or doesn't work, and what's better for this and that. And understand, once you go do something, you kind of understand it. Like, okay, like so many people don't understand that Node.js is a single threaded model. And here, because it's single threaded, here's what you have to do in order to handle that. And oh, you have a single threaded object doing lots of queries to your databases and lots of locks are happening. Well, guess what? If you now have 50 Node.js instances all hitting that database, you get into contention, blah, blah. So I just spend, I spend every week, every day playing with something, tinkering something. So that's what I like to do. So people have real hobbies. They knit or golf or
They knit.
they brew their own coffee. I have a lot. I know two people, early 20 somethings, who love knitting. It's like, wow, how about that? So my hobbies are tinkering. So, in my house, we have a rather large backyard, and like I want to go buy a robot to cut the grass, right? So a normal person will buy the robot to cut the grass, and they'll have an installer come in and set up the GPS coordinates of their land, and the little robot will go cut the grass. I want to learn how to program the robot so I can have the robot chase my dog when my dog is outside in the yard, right? so, so, so that's me. That's my tinker culture. It's like, oh, like how do I break this, or how do I look at this? So I'm always doing that, and that keeps me fresh and up to date. And yeah, so I love reading about technology. I love reading about things. So the benefits of this language versus that language, or this platform versus that platform.
What do you read? TechCrunch, or like what's like your source?
I don't know. In my RSS reader, I think I have 150 feeds that I go through every day.
150 feet.
Yeah, that I'll peruse through every day. Anything from VentureBeat to Silicon Valley Insider, Business Insider, TechCrunch. I'll read random stuff on Medium posts that people post. I'll look at Stack Overflow kind of articles, or people like kind of solve the problem. It's like, oh, I wonder how someone solved this. Go throw it in Stack Overflow and go read. Books, there's always kind of random books that you're reading, either technical books or business books, or just random kind of crazy stuff. I'm very interested in autonomous cars. It's just it's been something that I've been interested in for a long time. So how do you do vision? How do you do, Elon says LiDAR is dumb, but okay, what does LiDAR give you versus not? So now you have to go learn about LiDAR. You go read, you go Google a whole bunch of articles, you find some scientific articles versus kind of random articles, and you kind of read how LiDAR works, and then go buy a LiDAR sensor. You can get them really cheap in China, and go bring it here and go throw it in, like go program it. So yeah, I think the beauty of the age we're in, that information is everywhere. I think the harder part is siphoning through kind of the bullshit information versus the real information. So, because everybody writes with opinion, right? Everything is not necessarily objective. So, you got to understand what you're reading and play things against each other, stuff like that. So,
for sure. So we're at the 1 minute fire round session now. Actually, you brought up a really good point. You read, right? So what's your favorite book?
What's my favorite book? I don't know if I have a favorite book, but I will tell you the book that I'm reading now is Shoe Dog, which I think
I love Shoe Dog. Oh my God, it's my all-time favorite book.
Well, there you go.
Okay,
so I kept meaning to read it, and I read like 2 pages, and then I put it down because something else, caught my attention. And then I would go back to it, right? And then, so I finally said, okay, stop. I'm going to actually read this now. So that's kind of what I'm focused on.
I think like if you listen to it, it's way, like I normally listen to 1.5 speed, so like you can finish it faster, and then like I don't know, like I feel like if you're like
I like to read.
You like to read. Okay, so
Yeah,
you're
the
one of those.
audiobook thing is not for me. I like to read. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a crazy book. I don't think anybody reads it. And I'm not sure if the person's well respected or not, but Brian Grazer wrote an interesting book called Face to Face.
Face to face, like the period of time to period of time, or like it's like a face or face to face.
How do people socialize and interact to be able to make decisions and talk and influence others?
Okay, so what is like the word face? Is that like face, like my face?
What we are doing right now, we are talking face to face.
Oh, okay.
I can
face
see
to
you.
face.
You can
Okay,
see me.
sorry.
Yeah,
Okay,
so we're
awesome.
together. It's two people or more people,
Okay,
but you're in a room talking to. It's not like you're in a movie just projecting and you don't get to interact with people, or you're standing on a stage talking to 10,000 people. What is it?
Yeah.
What do you do? How do you read people and understand people when you're sitting in a conference room with 5 other people and you're trying to go negotiate or make a decision? Understand people, right? Yeah, it's a unique perspective. I'm not saying it's the world's greatest book, but I'm just saying it's kind of fun book to read. But there's all kinds of things like that you go read. Yeah, just be inquisitive.
Who made the biggest impact in your career?
I had a manager on Internet Explorer by the name of Ben Slifka. He was the first person to really just cut through it all and have real heart-to-heart talk with me about what I do well, what I'm doing terrible, could he help me, how to navigate kind of the craziness that exists at Microsoft or any company. He's just kind of a insanely smart, pragmatic person. He sees the world in a unique way. So I would say it was probably Ben who had the most influence.
Who would you invite to your dinner party?
Who would I invite to my dinner party? If you ask my wife, it would be no one, because I hate dinner parties.
Now, who does she invite to the dinner
party? For me, I would invite. That's a hard question for me. I would invite my team, because getting to know each other and getting, to be in it together is important. So I would invite my team to a dinner party. Yeah. Not the most exciting answer, I don't think. But,
this is the third time I heard about inviting the team.
Yeah.
So it's a great answer. I love it. What do you do outside of work? I mean, where can we find you outside of work? That's like the question.
That's an awful question.
I know.
Again, I like to play when I'm not working. Yeah, coding is my hobby, and playing with hardware is my hobby. Outside of work, you will see me walking around. I like to go for walks. Put on my AirPods and just kind of go for a walk. And sometimes there's no music playing in them whatsoever. It's just, so people don't bother me. I'm a weird person, very weird, and people understand this. Like, I would go spend hours at a Starbucks sitting and watching and listening to people, because you learn so much. So it's not a hobby, but you would see me walking around a Starbucks if you saw me on the street. Hobby-wise, I like to travel, so you will see me on a beach, or you'll see me in some random location. You'll see me in the Austrian Alps or in Italy or in the UK. I love traveling. I love exploring either cities or unique locations or beaches. So my hobby is travel.
Where is the best place?
Hard COVID.
Where is the best place you've traveled to?
That's a good question. Where's the best place? That's really hard. That's really, really difficult. I think I had, my mom's Italian, so I have affinity to Italy. So I really enjoyed kind of driving through Italy, going to the different villages and seeing everything from the north to the south and kind of being part of that culture. So that's always something fun for me. I am, again, in my boring nature, I think I'm not a skier, I'm not a snowboarder, I'm not a wintry person. But when we go to the Alps, it's just phenomenal. It really is just beautiful. So I like kind of being there and being able to just see these amazing mountains, you know. It feels like it's, 10 meters from you, like, because they're just so close, going so high. So that's kind of the places I like. But again, I like cities. So like I like going through Barcelona, or I like walking through London or Paris, or I'll say it this way: the place I want to go, I would love to go to Vietnam. I've not been to Vietnam. I've heard it is absolutely stunning and beautiful.
Awesome. Yeah, I was gonna say I went to Italy with my mom, like literally 10 years or 11 years ago, maybe. I don't know. Like it was 2009, I guess. Yeah, it's beautiful. I love it. There's a country inside of a country.
That's right.
Yeah, it was fantastic. I was like, it was mind blowing. Sorry.
Yeah.
Anyway, David, thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Sure. Thank you very much for having me. I appreciate it.